Welcome to the Workforces Podcast. I'm Julian Alsid.
And I'm Caitlin Lemoyne, and we speak with innovators who are shaping the future of work and learning.
Together, we unpack the complex elements of workforce and career preparation and offer practical solutions that can be scaled and sustained.
This podcast is an outgrowth of our Workforces consulting practice. Through weekly discussions, we seek to share the trends and themes we see in our work and amplify impactful efforts happening in higher education, industry, and workforce development all across the country. We are grateful to Lumina Foundation for its past support during the initial development and launch of this podcast and invite future sponsors of this effort. Please check out our Workforces Podcast website to learn more. And so with that, let's dive in.
Caitlin, in so many of our recent conversations, we've discussed how workforce development has moved from being a fringe topic to a central economic imperative. Over the past few years, there's been a real shift toward a skills-based ecosystem where the goal isn't just a one-and-done credential, but creating sustainable, family-sustaining career paths.
It's true, Julian. And while the policy and tech landscapes are moving incredibly fast, we keep coming back to the importance of the human connection and social supports as the true secret sauce for helping students persist and thrive in this new economy. It's not just about the technical training, it's also about the foundational skills that allow learners to pivot and grow over a long-term career.
Which is why we're so thrilled to have our guest join us today. Philip Weinberg is a leader who's been at the forefront of this work for years, proving that high-quality, intensive training can fundamentally change the trajectory of lives and communities.
That's right. And the breadth of his experience is what makes him such a powerful voice on this topic. Phil is the president and CEO of Strive, and his career has spanned the public, private, and nonprofit sectors. Before taking the helm at Strive in 2011, Phil was appointed by Mayor Michael Bloomberg as president of the New York City Workforce Investment Board, where he oversaw workforce development services for the nation's largest workforce area.
Phil's journey also includes significant leadership in education reform and private sector experience at the management consulting firm Bain & Company. That range of experience is exactly what he's used to lead Strive through a period of growth and renewal. Under Phil's leadership, Strive has scaled to 14 cities, focusing on helping students facing significant systemic barriers across the workforce.
Strive has become a model for how to blend rigorous professional training with the long-term coaching necessary to move people from entry-level jobs into sustained careers. We are so happy to have you with us today. Welcome to the Workforces Podcast.
Thank you. Really thrilled to be here. Thanks for having me.
So as we dive into the conversation today, Phil, we'd love to hear you tell us in your own words a bit more about your background and the journey really that led you to your role at Strive.
Like many people, my journey has not been a straight line. As you've described it, it's been across multiple sectors, corporate, government, and now nonprofit. And I think like a lot of people, I entered the corporate sector thinking that was where the innovation was happening. And if you wanted to do big things in social impact, it would be the platform to do so. And I had an early experience, my first time working in government in Chicago. And this was, to date myself, back in the 1990s during the sort of welfare to work reform era. And I had the incredible fortune to work with some audacious, courageous, visionary leaders within government, working across sectors. And for me, it really opened my eyes to what's possible and the ability to do big things from government and across sectors. So I once again found myself within city government, as you noted, working in the Bloomberg administration here in New York City, focused on helping uplift individuals and access career opportunities that could, in fact, change their lives and their families' lives. So whether it was on the education reform side, as you noted earlier, or on the career pathways, economic mobility side, my career's always been focused on the question of how do we help individuals gain opportunity, advance in their lives? How do we create communities that are more just and more equitable? And so I'm sitting in city government. I got a call from a recruiter, and it turned out that Strive, which at that point had been around for about 25 years, had been a leading workforce development nonprofit, its CEO was transitioning and they were looking for someone to lead Strive into the future. And so I came up to visit the team. I stepped into a classroom. I was totally blown away by the power and depth and quality and engagement of what I encountered. And so for me, I just imagined how powerful it could be to take that model, expand it in New York City, and ultimately to consider how we could scale that in partnership with additional communities around the country. So that's what landed me here at Strive. I am almost 15 years in, and really grateful and energized to be part of this organization and part of this work, as you noted, in advancing economic mobility in communities nationally.
So Strive has grown and I guess serves about 2,000 students now, and you have a goal of serving 10,000 with support from your investors. It's like Blue Meridian and others. We heard you talk about using an evidence-based approach, and so how are you going to use an evidence-based approach to ensure that your really exponential expansion there doesn't compromise the quality of outcomes?
Well, I appreciate the question. You've actually perfectly hit upon the real tension, I think, for any organization that's considering taking a quality model and bringing it to scale. And so I'd say that tension between quality, scale, I'd add a third component, which is the economics of scale, how to ensure that as you do grow and expand, that happens in a way that's economically sustainable. And I'd say for us, the focus on quality as we scale is first and foremost rooted in our values. So as an organization, what do you believe? What's your true north? How do you ensure that you hold dear to those principles and those values, and that all decisions really flow through that filter? More practically speaking, for us, it starts with having built an evidence-based model in partnership with our research partners at MDRC. So building a comprehensive model that's built on the best evidence. In our case, it's predicated on the work advance model. And so ensuring that we are confident in the evidence base upon which our work is structured. So once we built that foundation, it then is incumbent on us as we grow to think about, well, what elements of that model are essential to remain consistent across our communities we serve? And where do we see a need to be contextualized? And in many cases, we see tremendous value and opportunity to contextualize the work that we do within our community partners. So partnering with community colleges and other anchor institutions as a way to ensure that as Strive expands, we're doing so in a way that is authentic and resonant within the communities we serve. Investing in infrastructure. So clearly there is delivering great programming, but then there is, as you scale, having the infrastructure to support scaling with quality. So what does that look like? These are often the not the most glamorous aspects of operating a nonprofit, but often some of the most essential. So having strong performance systems and financial systems and data systems, having the operational backbone, having the programmatic support tools to ensure that as you grow, the support system is in place to grow thoughtfully and with quality. And I guess the last thing I would say is really growing with an eye toward being a learning organization. And that certainly is one of our values at Strive, which is we've got a deep history to draw upon. So over 4 decades of service, over 90,000 students served. So while there is that very deep reservoir of history of practice, we also approach the work with a great deal of humility, which is what are we learning? What is the labor market telling us? What are the kind of policy context changes telling us? And how do we as an organization adapt accordingly so we can maintain quality and focus even as we grow? So not an easy feat. I won't claim that we have sort of honed this, but we are certainly with a values-driven approach committed to that endeavor.
So Phil, you've given us much to think about and dive into further during this conversation. I think one thing that, would love to hear you talk a little bit more about are both the individuals you serve and also the programs you offer. So we just love to hear a little bit more context there, especially as we think about, like you're saying, the complexities of bringing these programs to different geographies and settings.
Absolutely. So Strive serves individuals who are talented, motivated, eager to work, and oftentimes have just found themselves facing steep obstacles, often multiple obstacles. And so we serve a broad range of individuals, 18 and older, men and women. People often come to us unemployed, mostly on public assistance, often facing obstacles like food insecurity, housing insecurity. Our average age is about 30. So we have many parents or those who are supporting minors. And so we recognize that our students come to us with lots of aspirations. They've oftentimes found themselves in a revolving cycle of dead-end jobs. And the question is, how do they break through?
Mhm.
And so the model we built is really one that provides a platform to support those individuals in gaining the kind of habits and behaviors to succeed at work, and also the skills and credentials and supports to be able to enter entry level positions that have good jobs, the opportunities for advancement, and to support them in accomplishing their goals. I guess the one other thing I would note is that among the obstacles that our students face, nearly half our students have been impacted by the justice system, whether they've been direct incarcerated and returning from incarceration. And I'd say one thing we've done programmatically is really ensure that we are meeting our students where they are. And so we've, over the last decade, worked with real intention to ensure that we are focusing our programmatic model and our interventions exactly where our students need them most. And so we've got, to your question about what are our programs, we've got our flagship program, which is our career path program. It supports a wide range of students to build careers in the healthcare, construction, and logistics industries. So those for us have become real areas of expertise. But then we noticed that about a third of our students had been coming to us justice impacted and from incarceration. And as a learning organization, we asked ourselves, are we doing enough for this population? And with that, we engaged with kind of the leading thought partners we could find and built what we now call our Fresh Start program, which is designed for adults coming home from incarceration. And so for us, that's just a recognition that those individuals are facing other obstacles, family reunification, search for housing, in ways that perhaps our general student population is not. And so we've been, based on the work we've done at Rikers Island and with a number of correctional departments and partners, we've been honing and delivering this program for years, and we're now in the process of replicating this. We just launched it in Birmingham, Alabama, the first time outside of New York City. And I say the last thing I would say is that we also noticed about a third of our students were coming to us as young adults, 18 to 24 years old. And we asked ourselves the same question: are we doing enough to support the successful outcomes as a data-driven, kind of evidence-based organization? And what we did is we decided to kind of completely revisit and interrogate our programming for these young folks. And so we invited in thought partners who specialized in positive youth development, our research partners at NDRC, and we reconstructed, based on our core programmatic pillars, a model that we now call our Future Leaders model, which is specifically designed for 18 to 24-year-olds. And this is a model that's probably been implemented in upwards of 15 to 20 communities, serving thousands of young people across the country over the past decade.
So in your efforts, Phil, working with healthcare, construction, logistics, my understanding is that a key part of the model involves working with employers, sort of anchor employers, to map or backward map capabilities into the programming. Can you speak about how that takes place? How do you keep current? We do a lot of work building those bridges between, education and training organizations and employers. And it just feels like, especially these days, a constant, process of trying to keep up. And how do you do it and ensure long-term success?
Absolutely. So I appreciate the terminology used, backward map. In many cases, it feels like that is, in fact, the work that we're doing. So it started with a very intentional selection of the sectors within which we work. And we work with a terrific group of thought partners to determine where do we see opportunities in the labor market where there are good jobs with good wages and conditions for good jobs and advancement potential, where you do not need a post-secondary degree in order to get your foot in the door, in order to be able to then advance. And for us, that in fact led us to healthcare and to construction and to logistics. But there's the concept, there's the labor market data, and what it tells us and where we think there's opportunity. And then there's what, as you were noting, Julian, what the real world tells us, our employer partners, where there's actual demand and what the skill sets and competencies that graduates would need in order to be able to succeed and stand out and thrive in the workplace. So for us, that starts with partnerships and listening closely to our employer partners. I'll use healthcare as just a brief example, and I'll use our kind of backyard, our flagship site is in New York City and in the community of East Harlem. The largest hospital in East Harlem is called Mount Sinai, now part of Mount Sinai Health System. And they were trying to increase their community hiring, and they were also trying to fill roles that they had found difficult to fill in their medical and billing system. And so they reached out to Strive. And this was not an area of expertise for us at the time, but a real area of aspiration. This is over a decade ago. And we said we would love to co-create something with you. And so we built a pilot. And the pilot was to serve a small group of 15 students to be able to access positions to operate those medical billing and scheduling systems. And to fast forward, it was a huge success because we started small. We co-created this in partnership with the human resources team. So this was not a notion of, doing something charitable or philanthropic. This was a notion of being a good community partner, a good community citizen as a hospital, and also trying to tap into untapped talent pipelines. And so I mentioned that example because that kernel, that seed that got planted really became the basis of a much broader based partnership with that hospital system as they grew in a range of positions that are really positive entry points into healthcare careers. Patient care positions, billing and coding positions, environmental positions, dietary, transporter. And so the quality of those relationships, listening to our employer partners, understanding their pain points, understanding where they have hiring gaps. In fact, it was then in the pandemic when they said, you know what, we don't need the positions that you've been partnering with us on, but we now need to transport equipment and supplies across our system. Can you help us? And so we leaned into that opportunity, and that helped us build out a robust logistics pathway within our health partnerships and also beyond. And so for us, it really is about rooting in the partnership, listening closely to the human resources teams. And when we now engage with new communities about where and how Strive might be able to make a difference, those are always predicated on deep partnerships, mutually beneficial partnerships with banker employers. I'll just use the example of Ochsner Health in New Orleans, which has been a phenomenal partner of ours. And I'd say the ingredients that make a partnership strong, and this is certainly true at Ochsner, it's true at Mount Sinai, and many of our hospital system and other employer partners across the country. One is they inform our training. So they're co-creating with us the training and credentialing that's going to be needed for someone to enter and then stand out in those roles. Two is they're working with us on the recruitment process. So they're not guaranteeing our students positions, our graduates, but they certainly are committing that if we're producing quality graduates, that then there will be a pathway into their hiring system. Some of our hospital partners, in fact, have Strive listed on their drop-down menus for their hiring teams. And then I'd say lastly, just a really honest and candid partnership based on two-way communication. Where is this working? Where is this falling short? Constantly iterating to ensure that we're learning lessons together. We're doing this in a way that is building strength and trust in the relationship, and ultimately deepening partnerships and extending those into other domains.
As you seek to expand and broaden your reach across states and regions, I'm wondering, do you also look at different industries as well? Because I can see, this is such an intensive process you're talking about, right? So are you thinking you're going to focus in those three areas long term, or do you also look to, what are the emerging industries or areas of opportunity across different regions?
Absolutely. So you must have been eavesdropping in our planning conversations. We're going through some intensive planning. I'd say a couple things. One is that we are always exploring where else do we think we can contribute to a local talent ecosystem, and where do we think Strive is distinctly equipped to be able to do so. And so in many cases, it's by developing depth in areas where we feel like we are particularly well suited and our student population is particularly well suited. But as you noted, there's lots of shifts in the economy. There's lots of disruptions related to technology. And so it constantly challenges us to think about, are there other industries, or in some cases, other occupations within industries where we're seeing increases or spikes in demand, and where we think Strive might be particularly well suited to support that. And I would say that, one of our ethos as an organization, we do try to be responsive and agile to the changing market conditions, but we try not to be overly opportunistic in the sense that it's okay to say no.
Mhm.
It's okay to look at an opportunity, say that is, certainly a need that the employer or the community has. Are we best equipped to support that community or those sets of employers to fill those needs? Those are the conversations that we're typically having as we think about ways in which we can deepen our impact and broaden it within current and new communities.
Phil, so Strive is known for its support model, which I guess that continues over time with your students. Can you speak a bit about the model and why do you see it? How does it fit, and how is it part of the secret sauce of Strive?
Thank you for the question. And I think, Caitlin, you had referenced early in the discussion the notion
Yeah.
of like human connection. And so,
Mm.
even in a world that is being disrupted rapidly by technology, and all organizations, including Strive, are actively assessing how to best incorporate that into our operating and programmatic models. We're also mindful that the communities we serve often respond best when there is a deep level of human connection. And so, we've built a model predicated on 5 pillars. The first is an intensive work readiness model. It's a 3 to 4 week workshop focused solely on building the workplace habits and mindset to succeed at work. People often call these soft skills. We know this is anything but soft. This is professional communication, managing conflict at work, working within teams. And that really gives our students the leg up, not just to get the job, but also to succeed once in the workplace. The second pillar of the model is our occupational skills training. So this is ensuring that we are working with employer partners, assessing labor market conditions to ensure that our students are credentialed in a way that gives them access and hopefully a leg up within the hiring process.
Mhm.
Third is our coaching. So this is an important ingredient because so many of our students do come to Strive encountering so many obstacles, both professionally and personally, that the coaching model for us is an incredibly important way for us to help them understand and navigate through many of these challenges, whether it's related to childcare or food or transportation or navigating their entanglements with the justice system. The fourth pillar, of course, is our partnerships with our employers. So this is our job placement assistance. And our last pillar is another we call part of our secret sauce, which is our lifetime support. And I would note that, there is, to go back to your question about scale, there is such a temptation in the workforce arena, particularly how incentives are structured, to be transactional, right? Look for short-term milestones. And we know that if you're really committed to the notion of economic mobility for everyone, and for Strive, that means individuals that often face some of the highest hurdles to accessing and thriving in good careers, then we've got to build a model that's in it for the long term and that supports students not just at the entry point, but coaching them on the advancement. And for us, that is ensuring that getting that first job is a great cause for celebration, but it's not the final destination. And so once our students get that first job, we're sticking with them and supporting them as they're navigating through complexities in their lives and as they're looking to upskill and advance within their careers. So it is a holistic model. It is a long-term model. It's a very human-centered model. For us, it means our students build a great sense of community at Strive and a great deal of trust. And for us, that's a very sacred principle that we work really hard to preserve and to celebrate even as we grow.
Well, and building that network, I feel like, is so critical for many reasons, including that, as we led off the conversation with, right? Like careers are not linear, jumping from one job to another. So having that sustained network, it's an invaluable component of your program model. Given that the show is called Workforces, we like to have a question that asks about how others can be forces in the work. And so, Phil, we're curious to hear from you. What are a couple of practical steps you can offer our listeners who are looking to become forces in building inclusive talent pipelines or helping populations who are facing barriers to navigating the job market?
I would note one of your opening comments, which is this is an important time to be committed to this work. And it does seem that there is a recognition across sectors, policymakers, corporate, employer, philanthropic, that if we're really going to live up to our values as a country of fairness and justice and opportunity for all, then we've got to build these pathways that allow everybody, regardless of circumstance, to access careers and opportunities that can allow them and their families to live dignified lives that have the potential for advancement. And so there's room for lots of actors and players. There's a tremendous amount of energy and activity. We have the great fortune at Strive across our communities to partner with organizations big and small. And so what I would say is no matter where one finds themselves, whether a person or an organization, it's really being clear about, beginning with the end in mind. Julian, this is the backward mapping that you talked about. When you think about the talent ecosystem, what are we trying to accomplish? What are the objectives? What are the incentives of the various players? What are the funding opportunities? And then that allows each person or organization to take a really clear-eyed view of where do we fit? Where could we add value? Is there a role for us here? What is our superpower as an organization? And that means listening really closely, not just coming into a situation with a solution in mind, but having some hypotheses or having some areas where you may feel like you can contribute, but sometimes those assumptions get disrupted in the course of engaging with partners across sectors. And so being really intentional about when you're bringing a clear solution into a conversation versus when you're bringing kind of an appetite to co-create and problem solve as part of a larger ecosystem. The partnership development, this is capital that gets built during the partnership development process. So none of us can achieve any measure of impact unless we do it together. This is with other nonprofit partners, governmental partners, employer partners, philanthropic partners. So really investing time in building those relationships, building that capital, listening closely, understanding where there might be additive value to contribute. Again, there are many instances where we at Strive say, you know what, we're not sure we're a suitable addition to this partnership or to this effort to advance mobility, or are there ways we can be a thought partner, but it may not be an appropriate setting for us to establish operations. And I'd say, one other thought is the notion of dreaming big, but starting small. And this was the Mount Sinai example that I noted. It sometimes can feel really frustrating when there are big, grandiose ideas being discussed, and yet, sometimes it's not clear what the starting point is. And for Strive, whether it's launching a new site or launching a new program, we like to start small. We like to start, test, pilot, learn. Many communities have been exhausted by the promises and the commitments that have been made and not delivered upon. And so our commitment is we want to ensure that we are delivering upon any commitment that we made. We're not falling short. We're building confidence that the early steps we're taking have the potential to grow and snowball into larger commitments. So there's lots of practical ways and practical steps that any person or any organization can take to do so intentionally and to be open to the co-creation and the opportunism that can emerge in the course of a collaboration.
So, Phil, as we wind down our conversation, how can our listeners, as you dream big and continue to move in the direction of expansion here on the national level, how can our listeners follow you, continue to learn more?
Well, certainly, any listener can come to us online at our website at strive.org. So that's an easy way to plug in and get a sense of our programming, where we are, how we're thinking about the landscape of economic mobility. You can certainly follow us on our social sites, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, sign up for our newsletter. Come visit one of our sites. If you happen to be in a city or visiting a city where Strive has a presence, we would welcome you to come. Our approach is a partnership model. So we welcome partners of all kinds. We welcome thought partners. We welcome learning communities. So we invite folks to come in and, you never know where those conversations can lead.
Great. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today, Phil. I feel like I'm taking so much from this conversation. I love that dream big, start small, and really deciphering where you're going to play versus what you're not going to, maybe, and making intentional choices and kind of on both sides of that line of thinking. So really appreciate this conversation today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you both.
Really appreciate your taking the time, Phil. Thanks.
Great. Thanks. Take care.
We hope you enjoyed today's conversation and appreciate you tuning in to Workforces. Thank you to our listeners and guests for their ongoing support, and a special thanks to our producer, Dustin Ramsdell. If you're interested in sponsoring the podcast or want to check out more episodes, please visit workforces.info/podcast. You can also find Workforces wherever you regularly listen to your favorite podcasts. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, like, and share it with your colleagues and friends. And if you're interested in learning more about Workforces Consulting, please visit workforces.info/consulting for more details about our multi-service practice.